Previously on Stay in Your Lane.
It comes down to how long is the door open? How long do you take to get the product off the trailer? When you pulp it, are you pulping it inside or outside? I mean, I think as the responsible shipper, you need to know how the receiver, what's his receiving process. So again, so you can have an intelligent conversation about, okay, where did this issue happen?
We try to take everything into account. The reefer download for sure is an important piece of the puzzle. But I'm also the destructive temperature from the customer is also, those are the primary pieces that I'm going to look at.
Before being notified that the product was not in spec or at temp on the receiving end, the download stated that it was warm, and then you look for a pulp, and it's again hours later. I don't think that's good practice. So we say, okay, how are other receivers and shippers doing it? I know, for an example, when you check into a delivery for Walmart, there's a receiving record report for every shipment, and it shows the box temp you showed up at the guard shack to deliver, because if you're not at the box temp at that point in time, you're going to be refused. Are you familiar with that, Nathan?
I've never had it happen. Oh, with Walmart, no. I was not aware of that, but it makes sense.
Yep. So they're checking it when it gets to the guard shack for its delivery before they let it through the gate. They're documenting the box temperature of the unit on every shipment. Joe, are you aware of that?
I'm not, but that makes that's a really good process and a good procedure. That probably should be standardized in the industry.
I would agree with that.
So if you show up at a receiver at 32 degrees or 33-degree box temp, and your product is supposed to be under 40, if it's a dairy or anything like that, or anything with dairy in it, or egg, or anything of that nature, when you show up at the guard shack, if you're not at temp, you're going to be refused.
That's a hard stop right there. Why even go through the rest of the process?
Absolutely. So then you get to the dock because your box is at temp for a 6 a.m. delivery, and you get nothing until almost 9 a.m. You get notified we're refusing the product. They took all the product off the trailer, put it all back on, and said it's not within spec. The recorder said it was warm. And then you request a pulp, and it's hours later you get a pulp. And it's not the pulp you believe should be there, matching everything else that we have. So the fun part of this is where we end up today. What's the temperature of the product? Okay, we get that. It's out of spec now. It didn't happen while it was in the driver or carrier's control. It didn't happen on the loading end. It must have happened on the receiving end at some level. Or we all have to get involved and figure out, what's causing this, or how do we keep this from happening in the future, which is the real value to the conversation. But then let me leave you with this. If this is my shipment with you, Nathan, which it's not, if I'm hauling this shipment for you and we get rejected, and that's the recorder, and that's the pulp temp, and I provide you this download, who pays for the product? Because that's the real loss.
So, the next piece would be we would be in further contact with the consignee to go through all of the records, the certifications, when everything was certified, the whole process that they went through. And actually, John, we actually just had a scenario like this. And the product was fine all the way through. It got to the consignee. They sat in the door for 2 hours, 3 hours, sucking in warm air, much to this scenario here. And so then when they temp the product, they did an air temp. It temped high. So then, they sent it out to, they went out and took pictures of the reefer unit, how it was set, what the temperature was. and it was high. It was set correctly, but the temperature that it was showing was the return air, which was sucking in warm air from outside. So, that whole scenario. But we did go through the carrier provided the reefer download, and we absolved the carrier. We ended up donating that entire delivery. I mean, there's multiple pages through, and the thing is, we went in a nutshell. We had a delivery. We had a stop prior. They delivered fine, and again went to the second delivery, sat in the door, sucked in warm air, and then it was rejected. And again, we absolved the carrier of it based on the reefer download, and this has gotten a lot of attention in our company. To the COO, our head of QA, we are going through and revamping our processes as well. As far as documentation, who's notified, when they're notified, we're the current situation. Uh, we're going through to revise all of our processes as well. Communication paths, who's doing what, when they're doing it, who's involved and when they're involved, just because of this reason. You know, it's certainly not as cut and dry as it used to be. When again, to your point, you have multiple different kinds of technology. Is it being used correctly? Is it calibrated correctly? When was the last time it was calibrated? Are the consignees where they should be? These are all things. Going back to your point, you check with the shipper. When was the product made? How long was the product stored? And at what temperature? So there's just a million different things need to be taken into account when you have a rejection. And
Well,
all of that stuff needs to be backtracked. The carrier being able to provide a reefer download that showed everything ran as it should was their absolution in that it's
I think that the important thing is no one wants loss or waste.
no, no,
Okay,
no.
we as Triple T, we want to be accountable for doing what's right by our shippers, by our carriers, by our receivers, all of our partners in the industry, right? So I think that we want to take ownership when there is a problem that we're responsible for. But I also know that there is no insurance for negligence in most of these scenarios. These scenarios represent nothing but a loss for anyone in this scenario, whether it be the carrier or the receiver or the shipper, that manufactures it. It's a loss across the board because you've ran manufacturing time to make and create product. You have upset a customer because they rejected your product, right? Even if they're the problem, they're not, they don't want rejected product. And then you've got a carrier who's now trying to defend their actions and worried that they did something wrong. So when we do deal with one of these scenarios, we say, where's the negligence happen? Well, we can't say the driver did anything negligent. We can't say the shipper did anything negligent. And in this scenario, it would be from the point that we got to the receiver, from what all of our telematics, fax, download, and information, but it never jives with the recording.
And in your instance, John, that the temperature recorder, whatever you
Temp
wish to
tail.
call it, being on the first or second pallet from the reefer unit, showing 40 to 50 degrees for the entire trip, which I find odd, considering it would have the 30-degree air blowing over it the whole time, unless it was buried in with product. But then you also have the destructive temps that show the same temperature. So that's the question. You have two pieces of evidence that you have the destructive temp and the monitor that show one thing that coincide with each other or support each other, and then you have the download that shows the complete opposite, along with the store, the make, storage, and of the product itself from the shipper.
From the timeline.
Correct.
Right.
You're
So-
saying it was 2 weeks manufactured, 2 weeks and sitting in a cooler.
Yep. And we don't show evidence on the download of the product heat sinking or warming up after closing the doors and leaving. And our box temp upon delivery was right on also. So you say, if I picked up a liquid product like this, a beverage, that didn't have, fat content, that was very thin, no density, if I pick that up at a shipper and it's really 45 or 46 degrees when I load the product, and I put it in a trailer at 32 degrees for 2 days, I know I'm not going to show up at 45 or 46 degrees. I also know that all the other trailers that I loaded at that location that day delivered at temp. They were in the same refrigerated warehouse for days and days and days also. They all delivered at temp. This particular one, and it's the same receiver, is the one that's having the temp problems we're going into. The other receivers, we're not having any temp problems from the same manufacturer, same shipper, delivering the same days on consistent basis. So that leads me to say, I think we have a bad recorder. Now, to your point, Joe, Nathan, you guys, have you seen bad recorders that weren't accurate, that weren't calibrated correctly, or that weren't operating correctly?
Yeah, sure. From time to time, absolutely.
Nathan, how about you?
Rare occasion.
But you do see that.
It happens, sure. Have I seen any? No,
All right.
not that I remember as of recent.
Very good. Well, I'm going to bring some QA people. I'm going to bring some Thermo King and Carrier people involved into this conversation, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more. I've also got communication with the federal inspector that would be the one that would come in and grade the product for temp and quality and all of those things, and get their processes and perspectives on this scenario so we can keep looking for the solutions. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on Stay in Your Lane. Appreciate your wisdom and your support. Until next time,